On my Patreon page, there's a tier that allows people to request any game for me to do for these kinds of videos. And somebody requested that I do any Hudson Soft game. So after putting the entire Hudson Soft library into a random number generator list and spending $3, welcome to $5 Gaming, Bill Laimbeer's Combat Basketball.
Bring it on, bring it on, bring it on! What you gonna get?
Gonna get respect.
What you gotta get?
Gotta get respect.
What you wanna get?
Wanna get respect.
So how do you earn
Respect.
You know what was awesome about sports games in the 90s? Any athlete or coach with enough notoriety could get their name attached to one. Barkley Shut Up and Jam, Frank Thomas's Big Hurt Baseball, Bill Walsh College Football, George Foreman's KO Boxing, Brett Hull Hockey, Kevin Keegan's Player Manager, Sterling Sharp End to End, Tommy Moe's Winter Extreme, Jimmy Connor's Pro Tennis Tour, and of course, Lee Carvalho's Putting Challenge.
I am Carvalho. Now choose a club. You have chosen a 3-wood. May I suggest a putter? 3-wood.
But then there's Bill Laimbeer's Combat Basketball, which marked the first time I and several other grade school kids with SNESs uttered the words, "Who the fuck is Bill Laimbeer?" Yeah, that's exactly what I said when I was in 2nd grade, reading Nintendo Powers in study time. Detroit Pistons fans know Bill Laimbeer as part of the Bad Boys, a team known for its smash-mouth physical playstyle and won an NBA championship in 1989 and 1990. Laimbeer in particular was known not just for his size and toughness, but also for his surprisingly good jump shot and three-point shooting, and for his accuracy at the free throw line. People who aren't Detroit Pistons fans know Bill Laimbeer as that walking, talking sack of shit who would pick fights with players on the court. And he would go after anybody. Larry Bird, Charles Barkley, and Rick Mahorn.
Start shoving each other. And now Barkley gets into it, and he and Laimbeer. And now there are some punches thrown.
Michael Jordan.
To go opening quarter. There's a fight right there. Laimbeer and Jordan. Yes, indeed. There are punches thrown. Oakley.
Roscoe Parrish, though Bill didn't hold up so well against him.
Parrish, he can't get it to fall, and Parrish takes Laimbeer to the ground. Well, they had said it was only a matter of time till somebody did this.
And Michael Jordan did posterize him in the same game. And Barkley did ruin that pretty face of his.
Charles comes toward the Sixers bench. And Charlie...
Pistons fans will tell you that Barkley got wrestled to the ground by Laimbeer shortly thereafter and got his ass kicked. Everyone else will tell you that Laimbeer needed the assistance of several of his teammates to do so, and that most of the shots they got on Barkley were as he was on the ground being restrained.
Anyway, Bill Laimbeer's Combat Basketball, or going by the title screen, Co-3 Bat Basketball, was the first basketball game released for the Super Nintendo.
Think about that for a moment. Okay, that's long enough.
It's also the first basketball game Hudson Soft ever developed. And the last basketball game they ever developed, published in conjunction with Hewson Consultants, a publishing house which closed down the same year this game released. And, because it featured an NBA star, it did get some press and a ridiculous 90s commercial.
This player. Now it's all playing me.
Bill, what do you say? I say we'll thrash him. Get out of my face.
It's the new Super NES 1 or 2-player game. Bill Laimbeer's Combat Basketball from Hudson Soft. No refs, no fouls, only one rule to win.
Get yours.
Call 800-82-HUDSON, extension 1 for free tactical tips for Combat Basketball.
I'm not sure what's funnier, Bill Laimbeer looking like a low-rent stormtrooper, or that there was a tip line for this game. Because you can just... We'll save that for later.
It was also on the Amiga and Atari ST in Europe, but it was just called Future Basketball, presumably because they would react the same way I did to the game's other title. This game takes place in the year 2030, when a 73-year-old Bill Laimbeer somehow becomes commissioner of the NBA, gets rid of the referees, gets rid of fouls, and installs a bunch of weapons on the court. Then he realized he screwed up because the refs would start and end the game, so they slapped together a robot to do that. Also, 73-year-old Bill Laimbeer either aged very well or very poorly going by the title screen. He's either still young or made of paper mache. The game gives you a top-down view of the action, something most basketball games don't do, and has 5 players in a plus-shaped formation on the court. You play each game in halves like a soccer match, not quarters like, basketball. You can jump to block shots and shoot, pass the ball, and shove players to the ground. You can even goaltend, or for you non-basketball fans out there, block a shot when it's more than halfway to the basket. As for weapons, there's a heat-seeking bomb which targets whoever is coming after you, a mine which blows up if you step on it, and a saw blade which drunkenly swings around the court before eventually hitting whoever's defending you. This seems like a weird hybrid of Mutant League Football and NBA Jam. But before you ask, NBA Jam and Mutant League Football came out 2 years after this game. But arch rivals, the game NBA Jam was based on, came out 2 years before this in 1989. There are also power pills on the court, which give a temporary minor stat boost which allows you to move faster, shoot better, pass more accurately, and get up faster from tackling or being tackled. However, power pills don't stack, and if you're playing as someone with maxed out stats, it doesn't do anything. Honestly, I only ever noticed the speed difference, and even then I had trouble with that because, as you might have noticed already, the game doesn't run smoothly. At all. Every game takes place in a near constant state of slowdown, and I know it's not just designed to run slowly like Lakers vs. Celtics or Team USA basketball. Come to think of it, why were there so many basketball games which were designed to play so slowly they were one blue filter away from taking place underwater? Oh. I don't think it's supposed to be this slow, because there are points when the game runs more than twice as fast, usually when I'm in a corner with as few players on screen as possible. And when this happens, the clock runs normally, with 1 second being 1 second instead of 2 or 3. Needless to say, responding to defenders' movements, or not accidentally dribbling the ball out of bounds or into opposing players, is much more difficult when the game keeps speeding up and slowing down. As for the courts, they do change the center court logo and colors depending on what team is playing, but some other things about it seem a bit off. For one, considering the rule changes, this doesn't seem like a regulation court.
Get the fuck out of here, regulation!
Why is there still a foul line if there are no fouls and therefore no foul shots? Why is the key shaped like a trapezoid instead of a rectangle? Or why is there a key at all? Actually, it used to be shaped like that for Olympic and international basketball games, but about 6 years ago they changed it to be rectangular like in the NBA.
I guess out of all the things you could be on the wrong side of history for, Bill Laimbeer's Combat Basketball made a harmless mistake.
Just because there's no fouling doesn't mean there aren't any rules. There is still a shot clock, but it lasts 30 seconds instead of 24. Also, you can't see it. Ever. You can only hear a countdown when you're 10 seconds away from losing the ball. By the way, the shot clock doesn't always sync up with the in-game clock, so it tends to run faster. The only other major rule at play is backcourt violations. In the NBA, a backcourt violation is when a team doesn't get the ball past half court after 8 seconds, or when a team in the front court dribbles or passes the ball behind the center line. Backcourt violations are almost completely broken in this game, and it's not because dribbling in this game involves just holding out your hand and letting the ball bounce on its own.
Apparently basketballs in this game behave more like yo-yos. Damn it!
They do function for dribbling or passing the ball backwards, but you can hold the ball in your own half, never advancing the ball forward, and never get penalized for it. Also, if you make a steal at or near the center line, you'll almost certainly get called for a backcourt violation, even if you don't go backwards. Then there are times it happens for no apparent reason. Wait, how is that a backcourt violation? But how is that a backcourt violation? You can tell who you're controlling by the 2 arrows pointing at the back of your character. The same is used for the other team to indicate who's guarding you. However, when players bunch together, it gets hard to tell who you're controlling. It also becomes difficult to see the ball, because it uses the colors of each team currently playing, which makes it look more like a beach ball than anything else. There is character switching in this game, but the question is, how do you do it? The answer is, you can't. You automatically switch to whichever player is closest to the ball. As a result, you'll often wind up switching players and accidentally running away from the ball, which switches you to another character, and the cycle repeats. You also gain control of any players you try to pass to, but passing to a moving CPU assumes that the character keeps moving in the same direction. So several times you'll end up throwing the ball out of bounds because you weren't moving toward the ball. The weapons also suffer from character switching, as they home in on whichever opposing player is after you, which also switches based on ball proximity. It's not uncommon to see homing shots or saw blades hovering around the court bouncing between targets. But there's another bigger problem with passing. I mentioned earlier you can pass, jump for rebounds, blocks, and shots, and attack other players with a shove. Guess what the controls are for each of these? Jump is B, pass is B and a direction, and attack is B and a direction. All the controls are mapped to either one button or one button and a direction. This is an Atari 2600 control scheme on a console whose controller has 8 times as many buttons. Even late in the game, I found myself throwing passes to nobody when I wanted to shoot the ball, or lunging after no one when I wanted to block a shot.
Even considering how relatively new the SNES was at the time, the control scheme is such that there would be an unused button on the NES controller. And no, there aren't any alternate control schemes and you can't remap the controls.
There are problems across the board with the AI being too stupid to breathe. When either team inbounds the ball, whatever teammate throws the ball in stays out of bounds and won't come back in until you take control of them and move them back onto the court. You're not subbing out, guys, get back in the game! The opposing team, on every difficulty, regularly throws the ball out of bounds for no apparent reason. I guess they're trying to avoid losing the ball right away, but even when I'm not about to hit them, they still do it. Another thing about the AI, it only knows how to pursue you in a straight line. On inbounds, they have to stay a certain distance away from the person throwing the ball in, which is another soccer rule, not a basketball rule. So you can lead them to one side, get them stuck behind the combat basketball force field trademark, and pass it to yourself. Speaking of which, sometimes you'll end up controlling someone off-screen, and have to find out where the hell you are. The minimap helps slightly with this, but usually it's so nondescript that the dots representing the players can blend in with any players or power-ups which show up underneath it.
Alright everybody, blend in!
The AI also has a tendency to get players stuck on top of each other. Let's not focus on that. You can either play a single game or league mode. Single games have 4 difficulty settings ranging from beginner to professional and don't let you pick teams. But if you go into league mode, you'll see there are several teams, each with a worse name than the next. Direct Action, Danger Dudes, Real Vicious, Crazy Eddies, Slam Dunk Crew, oh, that reminds me, there's no dunking in this game, Man Manglers, Death Skulls, Prime Time Mad. In theory, the AI becomes smarter as the difficulty climbs, but only 2 things seem to change. They block shots more often, and they're slightly more aggressive, shoving players out of the way. Otherwise, I think strapping cardboard standees to RC cars would be more effective than these guys. On all difficulties, you can do the same thing to get points really fast. Score a basket, wait for the other team to inbound, then steal the ball and score again. Repeat ad nauseum. Just make sure you're facing the basket, because otherwise your player has to automatically rotate in midair, which takes so much time you're pretty much guaranteed to get hit.
To demonstrate the combination of bad AI and flawed gameplay, I set the game length to 30 minutes, cranked the difficulty up to professional, and tried to see how high I could run up the score. Try to guess how many points I won by, and keep this in mind. This is the 3rd game I ever played. I didn't even start league play yet, and I sure as hell didn't practice beyond figuring out what the controls are.
I mean, how silly is that, man? We're talking about practice.
And away we go.
If you guessed I would win by 113 points, you'd be wrong, it's only halftime. The score could have been a lot worse, but with about 3 minutes to play, I stopped trying to score and just ran the clock down. At that point, this game had been going for over an hour, and I just couldn't take the monotony anymore. For League Mode, there are 4 divisions, 3, 2, 1, and Super. You pick one team from Division 3 and can rename them and change their team colors. You play a 14-game season and get 2 points for a win, 1 point for a tie, and nothing for a loss. Not only are there ties like in soccer, there's a point system, which basketball, or at least NBA basketball, doesn't use. The top 2 teams get promoted to the next division, while the bottom 2 from the upper leagues get relegated down. So not only does this game follow some soccer rules, it's also structured like the English football leagues.
Did anyone who worked on this game know how basketball works? I mean, even I know enough about basketball to realize that I play the game like former 76er, Supersonic, and Cavalier Eric Snow. A point guard who wasn't a prolific shooter, but had a pass-first mentality and focused on being a lockdown defender. Sorry. For those of you who don't know what a point guard is, Eric himself explained it pretty well with this quote.
One word of advice. Tiebreakers in this game are bullshit. If you tie someone in the standings at the end of the season, the tiebreaker is where the team was ranked when the season started. You can end up tied with a team you never lost to during the season, and they'll be ranked higher because they were ranked ahead of you when everyone's record was 0, 0, and 0. The idea is to advance through each league until you reach the Super League, then finish first in that to win the championship. One thing League Mode does have going for it is player trades and positioning. You have 5 players, each with their own stats for speed, shooting, passing, etc., and can swap them into any of the 5 positions on the court. I like this, as it allows the better shooters to play in the front court and on the wings, while the slower but stronger players can hang back on defense. Then there's the trade function, which allows you to use any money you earn to get other players with different stats, and various 90s tough guy grimaces.
There's only 2 ways this can end, and in both of them, you die.
The catch is, when you trade someone, only half of their cost can be used to acquire somebody else. So if you have 1 million credits? What are these things? And you're trying to trade someone away worth 500,000, you can only acquire someone worth 1,250,000 at most.
I just assumed the Combat Basketball League is going to use all that extra money to pay the medical bills for the life-threatening injuries the player... no, it's all going to Bill Laimbeer.
Actually, I'm not kidding. Bill Laimbeer is in this game, and he's the most expensive player at 2 million... whatever the currency is. He has completely maxed out stats because, of course he does. But there are players about 1 million cheaper who are only missing a stat point in 1 or 2 areas. So Bill isn't much of an improvement over the players right below him, but is way more expensive. Kind of like a Nike shoe. The question, of course, is how do you get money in this game? 2 ways. One is by winning games. I don't know if ties or losses yield money because, well, I won every game I played. Each win gets you anywhere from 50 to 70,000 credits. And no, winning by more points doesn't affect how much money you get. Not from what I could tell, at least. When I realized that, I went from winning games by scores of 100 to 5 to winning games 6 to nothing. The other way is to pick up these hockey puck looking things that appear on the court. These are worth 10,000 each and pop up constantly during play. They even appear during non-league single matches, even though there's absolutely no use for them there. Once I realized this, I stopped putting up points and started hogging the ball so I could dribble around looking for these little bastards and power up my lineup faster. I went from playing combat basketball to playing 10-minute versions of a shitty coin-collecting Mario Party minigame.
Of all the gameplay elements I thought I'd find in an SNES basketball game, I can't say grinding was one of them.
However, aside from their general location on the court, there's no way to distinguish different players on a team from each other. Every player looks like a palette-swapped generic mohawk guy on the court. Either that or they're all wearing Mega Man helmets. So you just have to memorize where every player is so you don't end up taking 3-point shots with somebody who sucks at shooting. Then again, even with good shooters, it sometimes feels random as to whether a shot will go in or not. Unless you're using a character with 5-star shooting, there will be games where you'll miss from point-blank range at least 3 times in a row. Anyway, the only sticking point to holding the ball and farming for money is the shot clock. But fortunately, the developers didn't know how that works in basketball either. Usually the shot clock resets on a change of possession or a shot touching the rim. But here, the clock doesn't run if nobody's touching the ball. So I could either pass it to the other team and then immediately steal it back, or just leave the ball sitting on the ground and block the one AI player from getting to it so the clock never stops running.
That begs the question, if I just sit here and I don't say anything, and I don't do anything, and I don't cut to video game footage, would the video end faster? No, it wouldn't.
After progressing a bit and getting some faster players, I quickly learned not to put the slow players in front of the faster ones, because the faster ones would not just catch up, but bump and grind their teammates all over the court.
Pumps in a butt, pumps in a butt. We like the girls with the pumps in a butt. Pumps in a butt, pumps in a butt. Give me the girls with the pumps in a butt.
And of course, the AI kept trying to get the ball from me, but there wasn't much they could do about it. After a while, they would flip out and continuously dive across the court. The only thing that changes between each league, aside from a somewhat noticeable change in difficulty, is the music. I gotta say, the music's okay for the most part, but some of it seems out of place for a basketball game. Let me know what you think as I play the game's soundtrack over different titles. By the time I got to the third game of Super League play, I'd farmed so much money that my lineup consisted of... And I gotta say, the gameplay got old a long time ago. Having to play 56 non-competitive matches to get to the end certainly didn't help. But oh, what an ending you get for winning the Super League. And that's it. The game starts a new season and you keep playing forever with the hope of seeing a disinterested Bill Laimbeer wearing power armor and awkwardly holding a trophy.
If I wanted to see something like that, I would just pull up photos of my 10-year-old self wondering why my team's soccer trophy had a bowling guy on top of it.
Bill Laimbeer's Combat Basketball is a game, and that's about all the positives I have for it. The multiplayer can be decent fun for a couple of games, but otherwise the slow pace and poorly implemented game mechanics take a fun concept, basketball with no fouls and weapons, and turn it into an easily exploitable dull slog. At the time of its release, this got average review scores at best, but by the time other basketball games came out, and the NBA Jam SNES port came out, Bill Laimbeer's Combat Basketball looked severely dated. For $3, I could only recommend getting this as a novelty. And for everyone who isn't a die-hard Detroit Pistons fan, don't bother.
In the meantime, I have to go build up my stats. As shocking as this might be, I'm only a 1-star in shooting.
Not the best court, but it's within walking distance, so it'll do.
I started using that because the nylon nets were falling apart too fast. That went about as well as I expected. It's 43 degrees. Perfect basketball weather. There we go. You know what this shows about me as an athlete? Like what I'm capable of? Absolutely nothing.
Just because I am, I'm totally jinxing this shot. Fuck.
You know, when I used to play more regularly, they called me the bank because I'd use the backboard on almost every single shot. That's not true, by the way. There we go. See if we can get one more.
You are sadistic. I hope you know that. Oh. Fucker.